Perfect.
Oops.
Yeah. Awesome. Dude. This is awesome. By the way, this is the IoT Coffee Talk first. You know, where I haven't done something in post. No, actually, yeah. This is the first. That's awesome.
That's right.
Great to have you finally take something off your wall of guitars there and
shelf.
Something. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love it.
Well, it's good that you're also in a hotel room in California and you don't have your gear with you. So
yeah, it helps. It really helps that I have an ability to play live.
What show are you at, dude? Where are you?
Who?
You're in California?
I'm in California. Marvell just finished Marvell's Analyst Day 2023 yesterday. Really good, really well put together program. It was pretty cool. And then I'm headed to Sonoma for Silver Linings, what do they call it? Cloud Executive Summit. So there's going to be a bunch of executives assembled there, and I have like some speaking. I'm going to be moderating a panel. It's more like a fireside chat with no fireside, no fireplace, obviously, of course.
Just the chat.
But then it is Sonoma, so I could very well have a fireplace. And then
you should do a live. You should be doing wine reviews, like on stage. That's actually. It turns out that's way more interesting and important than a bunch of guys in Sonoma talking about the cloud.
Well, I think you're right. You're speaking the truth there, Rob.
There was a time when it seemed cool to talk about the cloud, maybe with a bunch of analysts or whatever. And now it's like whatever.
Yeah. It's like a bunch of people getting together to play Dungeons and Dragons on the weekend. You know what I'm saying? It's like that. Just make stuff up, and it's all about fantasy role playing.
Well, the stage stream of consciousness right there. Because I'm an idiot. Apparently, this hot new video game, Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
It's being heavily played. And really? As I learned from my middle son, that it's actually just a recreation of Dungeons and Dragons.
It is by Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, but apparently this one's better.
Is that Wizards of the West or what's the?
No. Oh, you're right. Wizards of the Coast. Those guys. Yeah. All I know is I noticed Scott Hanselman's just playing it 24/7 down in Portland. So
really, Wizards of the Coast. Actually, I did consulting for them a long time ago. They do like freaking card games, dude. They don't do the
Magic.
Yeah.
Big hit.
Yeah. But I bought Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
And I tried to play it.
Third is a charm, just like Windows. 3 times was a charm,
Yeah.
Or 3.1 times was a charm.
But yeah, the original version that came out, man, because I used to be a huge Dungeons and Dragons person.
Yes.
When I was a kid, right? I'm sure you guys were too. And man, when that thing came out, man, it was like my metaverse moment. You know what I'm saying? It was like all my Dungeons and Dragons fantasies came true, And but the weird thing is those games have not evolved that much over the years.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, it's like, you still do that point and click navigation. You bump into people and you say, okay, talk to this dude. And then there's like a whole scripted thing that goes on.
Like Zork, it's like very Zork-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
so I'm tempted to try it out. I just don't know if I should, maybe.
Just get a freaking powerful PC, because the only thing that it'll run on, I got the Mac version, and I've run it on several PC laptops, and it didn't run well.
Okay.
The only thing that it runs on is my Mac Studio with the M1, and I have
it requires the NVIDIA H100.
Yeah, some ridiculous crap like that. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Bill?
What's up?
We're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. This is going to be a Dungeons and Dragons episode. Did you play Dungeons and Dragons? Come on, dude.
I did, but I like shooting shit up and blowing stuff up, and
not rolling.
I've got that old school gangster mentality, so I
like
jacking people for their cars and stealing it. Grand Theft Auto,
Grand Theft Auto, baby, GTA.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably like sitting there at the table where all these guys are rolling dice and stuff like this. Like, hey, man, this is like ridiculous. You guys are a bunch of idiots. I'm going home.
Oh my God. So Leonard, you said you're down there for the Marvell deal to give some people some trivia, some ancient history trivia, and that ties into Intel. Yeah. A lot of people a long time ago said, well, Intel, you're really late to they say that about lots of people. You're late to the party, with ARM processors or not having really low power things for devices. You weren't in the game. But it turns out they actually were in the game. They were one of the first ARM licensees. If you had the compact iPac Pocket PC, you would have noticed it was a strong ARM 200 megahertz processor. Well, strong ARM was the name that Intel gave their ARM silicon that they did for a while. And then after a while, before the smartphone revolution really took off, they mistakenly thought, well, this is going nowhere. It's just like, pocket PCs and Palm devices. And so they sold the technology to Marvell.
Yeah.
And then the rest is history. And then, of course, they launched lame processors like Atom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. People, I don't think realize how much Intel invests early on in a lot of different things out there, and what you just cited, Rob, is a perfect example. I think the mainstream just thinks, oh, they're proprietary, they do their own thing. They're, IDM, full stack integration, vertically integrated, conglomerate. But they have their, when I was doing research on, this is like 6 years ago, on leading edge technologies that will define the next 10 years, they're all over. Their fingerprints are over everything, kind of like IBM. IBM is another company that I think is highly underappreciated for the R&D and advanced technology development that they do. People know about the quantum stuff, but they're so involved in other things. But no, it is a great, I guess, reminder that you just did about how some of these big companies actually are important in incubating some of these.
Although with Intel, they tend to incubate, and like Rob said, then they sort of sell it off. And 10 years later, they're like, let's reincubate that, and then they'll sell it off. And then
they have an
uncanny knack for getting out of the market just in time for it to take off.
Just in time to lose out on the whole thing. Shit, over and over and over again.
They have a good backswing, just the follow through is not.
Yeah.
So we'll see what last substrate stuff goes.
I think the reason IBM gets underappreciated is well, like you talked with Intel, the history of IBM going back several decades, all they've been doing is just selling off every part of their company that creates innovation. And that's until it just turned into just a big consulting firm.
Yeah.
And that's what people think of IBM, and that's what they did. They just kept selling off all the innovative stuff, hard drives, laptops, PCs, blah, 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 you name it.
Although it was by design, right? It was at Lou Gerstner or something. I mean, he wanted to take it into more of a solution company.
Service.
And to your point, in the moment there in the early 90s, it was to rescue the company because, hey, all you kids keeping track at home, IBM used to be the biggest player in tech, and then they almost went out of business, and they did the biggest layoffs in the history of layoffs in the early 90s. OS2 didn't save them, as it turns out, and it was this phoenix rising called Microsoft said, we're divorcing you, and OS2 is not going to be the future. It'll be this little Windows thingy. And IBM just collapsed. And I forgot how many, 300,000 people they laid off, and they were teetering on going out of business. And as Microsoft broke away from it. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting history to read.
Oh, yeah. Well, then go back toward Watson.
And Watson didn't predict it.
Yeah.
But you know what? There was another IBM employee who did predict all of it, and his name was Ross Perot. And Ross Perot, decades before, said software is going to be more important than hardware in the future. And they're like, you're full of shit. And Ross was right. He left and created EDS and created all this stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
He was absolutely right. How many companies have been told by one of their employees, I think this thing I'm working on is the future? And they're like, oh, Wozniak, this little thingy that you're working on with Steve's not going to be a big deal for HP. So you just head on down. Or, hi, I'm Rod Canyon, and me and my buddies here at Texas Instruments think we're going to invent this mobile portable computing thing, and it's going to be 100% IBM compatible. That's so stupid. Go ahead and start Compaq and change the world. There are so many stories like this in tech.
Yeah, that's
what makes anything possible,
Yeah. I mean, we weren't sneaking out the door building our tech. We told you about it. We got your permission because you said that's going nowhere.
That's the innovator's dilemma, right? It's like the existing business. You can't disrupt the existing business, the cash cow. And people are unwilling to make those bets. And, fortunately, entrepreneurs have conviction, and they get it done anyway. Of course, we're only talking about the successful. All the successful is about
a lot of them that blew out. There's an an interesting piece of history for you. This is a Compaq magazine from the 80s. And that's Rod Canyon.
That's like near me.
I would encourage you. I don't know if it's Netflix or where you can find it. I think I got it off of Apple TV or whatever. They made a documentary called Silicon Cowboys about the guys from TI who broke away and created Compaq and created portable computing, mobile computing, really.
Who bought Compaq, though?
HP.
Oh, that's right. HP.
Yeah. If you notice, when you're buying HP servers or desktops, you might notice that they're the Compaq names. Like if you remember Compaq Desk Pro or, anyway, so much great history. I would encourage you to watch this Silicon Cowboys thing. It's only like an hour and a half long, and it takes you through a bunch of rebels, because there were a lot of people back to our IBM discussion. IBM was the biggest player in the world in tech, right? So they did the PC. We all know about all the story of the PC and DOS and all that stuff and how all that played out and accidental empires and things like that. But then you have, if you remember the term clone computers or clone computing, the 80s, and you're like, what's that mean? Well, what it means is these guys at Compaq, because I got to know some of these guys because I worked with them and grew up in Houston. They're the guys who went in and reverse engineered the IBM BIOS to make clone computing possible, which gave rise to them, to Dell, to everybody else who's not IBM. And that's an interesting story about how you It's a legal story too about how you'll have an engineer who will observe. He might have observe how the BIOS works in every way, and he'll create a new spec.
Yes. Well, yeah, I worked for Phoenix Technologies, the BIOS guys.
Well, then you absolutely know then. Yes.
Neil Colvin and all those things. Yeah, that was the whole reverse, clean room, reverse engineering. You had dirty engineers and clean engineers.
Yeah. And you got to make sure they don't sue you or come after.
And it stood up. It stood up in court, and that blossomed into the whole third-party business,
Absolutely.
What was that show? Netflix show with Lee Pace?
Yes.
Catch Fire.
Catch Fire.
Yeah.
Halt and Catch Fire.
Halt and Catch Fire. Yeah.
They talk about that. That whole show was based on Compaq.
Yeah. It's a great show. Yeah.
It was a great show. And so a lot of people didn't realize we had innovation in the 80s. But we did. And a lot of people don't know that, like, once a month, Bill Gates, Rod Kenyon from Compaq.
Doesn't work for me.
Who was our favorite guy from Intel? Andy Grove.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
They were like meeting. They were like meeting secretly, like once a month or once every few months in the airport to basically strategize how their little worlds could take down the IBM empire. And it's really interesting that all this stuff was kind of going on behind the scenes. How can we take down this giant monster, Yeah. And they did. They did.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Andy Grove. You were a genius.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if it'll happen again. There's I think there's some large companies that they're innovating, they're inventing things on the leading edge of stuff, really not that great at commercializing it. So there's certain similarities to what you saw with IBM, right? Because even today, IBM has IBM Research. Amazing organization, always has been. They've been on the leading edge of everything from silicon all the way to AI. I've done exactly the greatest job of commercializing and capitalizing on a lot of the R&D, advanced R&D that they've always pioneered. And we see that also with like companies like Google and others, where they have the X projects and they have a whole slew of, they have like billions that they're investing in these projects, and hardly any of them have amounted to anything.
I mean, look at IBM and all the stuff they did with Watson and AI, like way back when. I mean, they were driving this story a decade ago or more. And
Project Debater. Do you know what I'm saying? Project Debater. Think about that. That was only.
You remember how they did remember ads more than a decade and a half ago? Smarter Planet. They were basically talking about IoT.
Yeah,
way back
was the
then.
Best campaign, dude. I love that.
It was a good campaign, but was it early? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, but for me, it equates to the "who cares" effect. I'm sorry, it's true, right? I mean, just because you innovate, all right, just because you create, or just because you come up with something new, the question that you have to answer is, who cares?
Right.
That's actually a really damn good question. I was like, okay, so you
need a T-shirt. You need a T-shirt called "Who Cares."
Who cares? Actually, should say, "Who gives a
new
shit?"
IoT Coffee Talk. Who cares?
Who in the back? Who gives a who cares, man?
I mean, so that kind of shifts everything, right? We can talk about all of the innovation that's taken place and how we've moved forward.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't see much in the way of hardware doing a damn thing other than what it's done. If you really want to look at something innovative, then you're going to look at the infrastructure pieces of it, right? Intelligent infrastructure.
Yeah.
As opposed to anything else. But it's not so much the hardware side that's doing anything. It's all of the software components and the distributed compute and all of these other things that are going to kind of be brought together. Then you can answer the question of who cares. It's not so much the citizens and everything like that. It's the cities, it's the feds, it's all of these larger organizations that then are going to, from my perspective, push things down and change the way things operate. We've said this several times, right? How do cities and everything procure? It's by RFP.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said it vocally in almost every instance that I've spoken, that is an antiquated way to select a solution provider.
Sure.
It's antiquated because typically it's not the cities themselves or the feds or anyone else that's writing the RFP. It's a consultant or a consulting house that has said, this is what we're doing and this is who we like. That RFP is written around that. Very seldom is it a fair, free to play, come bring your best, and we'll do that. And until some of those things are innovated on, transformed, then we're going to get more of the same.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, software is great, but like I'm Bill. You probably don't know. I attended Marvell's Analyst Day, and when you look at what they're doing with photonics, what they're doing with interconnect for data center, when you look at what they're trying to push in terms of the envelope of, let's call it AI computing architectures for all this Gen AI nonsense, there is a lot of important innovation happening there. But yes, your question of, and who cares? I think at some point you care when these innovations influence the economics of everything else. I mean, whether or not people will give a crap about Gen AI applications and the pull that it has on innovations and inventions on the hardware side for data centers. We'll see if that amounts to anything. But I've said it before. One of the things that really impresses me is the investments that are happening in hardware that can enable a new level of favorable economics for everything else. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't think, so it's about the system. It's about how software and hardware, in whatever state they are at any given time, can produce a value for the business, constituents of these technologies at a viable set of economics. Right. I mean, that's what ultimately matters. So you can't divorce the two because, I think hopefully we've made it this axiom famous here on IoT Coffee Talk. Yeah, software may be eating the world, but you gotta have friggin' hardware to run that shit on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but I guess to me, when I look at that, I say, all right, well, so they're going to do data center interconnect and things like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm still going to ask the same question. Really, who cares?
Yeah, it's a friggin' great question. No, it is a really friggin', and you know what? A lot of these guys don't know. They're just building it because someone's throwing money at them.
Exactly.
Right.
My point
But at the end of the day, who cares about this crap? Because the answer to that question is whether or not these investments and that market movement it sticks, and that is whether it's at AWS or any of these numbers of conferences in industry, that is the big question right now.
Right.
Well, who cares? Great, you're selling a bunch of crap.
Right.
People are buying your stuff, but who cares at the end of the day?
But I think also going back to your earlier comment about IBM in the 80s and stuff, I mean, back when this stuff was forming, people were just building stuff and then building faster stuff and building faster stuff. And it wasn't about solutions, right? It was just about building more stuff and faster stuff. We sort of flipped. At some point, there was a flip. And now we're talking about, well, we need solutions to solve business problems. And they need to fit inside an ROI, and they need to be systems, and so the industry is kind of flipped. And so folks that are still in the old school of well, I'm just building this new chip and it's faster than the old chip. I mean, to Bill's point, who cares? I think I was talking to Olive Semiconductor yesterday down in Pleasanton, and he's built this really awesome chip, this kind of tiny Cortex M Ethos M55, AI accelerated thing. It's the tech is, if it's not part of a solution, does it even really exist anymore, right? I mean, it's kind of like the tree falling in the forest. And so his whole attitude is well, we're building this, tiny eye peel and stick AI vision thing. That's our thing. And so this chip is designed to power that scenario, and that can be used for inventory tracking and blah blah blah. So I think even a lot of these tech companies are getting more solution thinking into what they're building. They're like, I'm building this to solve these problems, as opposed to just up in the clock, or I'm putting more memory on it. So hopefully, that seems to be more of the norm these days than the old school, which is, just crank out a better one of whatever the last one was, which, still is a little bit out there, but who cares if it's just faster, if it's not
You're
solving
right. It always used to be about speed. I do remember in the early 2000s when Intel hit a wall of performance and too much heat. They had been increasing megahertz, gigahertz, and all that kind of stuff on their CPUs. And then people were expecting them to come out with a 4 gigahertz speed chip. And they finally came out and said, we can't do it, or we can, it's just burning up. It's too hot. We can't ship. No one can ship PCs or servers with this thing. And so they backed off, and then they changed the way they do sending, voltage through gates and stuff like that. Remember, they were just, and they had to rethink everything. And all of a sudden we backed down to 1.7, gigahertz, processors and 2.0 and things like that. And people are like, are we going slower? But it was when we started getting into a different way of doing it, and
multi-core,
then having many cores and stuff like that.
We went to number of cores and stuff.
Yeah. And then someone also said, hey, maybe power consumption is a factor too. Maybe we shouldn't be eating up so much energy. And then that became a thing.
Yeah.
And so this rocket ship of speed just went, and we started looking at other stuff. Yeah.
But there's still elements of that, in the culture of, coming out with the next thing that's bigger and better. But what end, you're right. It's got to be to what. But
so
there doesn't seem to be a lack of an appetite to consume.
So, we wouldn't be a great talk show here and on tech if we weren't breaking news. So today we're breaking Google Gemini, which is their newest thing in their LLM to take on ChatGPT, and it's supposed to be faster than GPT-4 and
faster. See, there you go. It's faster. Therefore, it's better.
More stuff. We've got more parameters.
Useless.
We have trillions more parameters than
trillions of parameters.
Faster.
Opposed to billions. Yeah.
How does it operate with Wi-Fi 8?
We're running it on top of Wi-Fi 8. Scientific silicon. Yeah. Anyway, go check it out, folks. You heard it here. We broke it here.
Nice.
Google Gemini, their new generative AI stuff that's even faster, better, awesomer.
Awesomer.
Yeah. Awesomer. Is that a word? No.
Yeah, I think you're going to end up with so many of these kind of foundational models to choose from, and they'll all be absorbed and hidden and obfuscated behind solutions ultimately. You won't even know what it's running on at some point. So, but more power to them. I mean, I think that's the innovation that's happening. I'm actually more interested in the language models that are getting smaller than larger. That can run on lower power silicon and still get, still solve problems. Because I think it's easy if you have unlimited, horsepower in data centers and H200s. It's harder when you're like trying to run it on constrained environments with cost and power and other things. So
no, you're so right. And so to that point, there is a Nano, Pro, and Ultra version of Gemini for different size silicon, and apparently the Nano might work on a smartphone. So we might have to kick the tires on that stuff this week and play with it.
Around Snapdragon, see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
our friends in San Diego are thrilled.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it's interesting what you said, Pete. These models are getting smaller. I think a lot of the hyperscalers are seeing the pressure of having to figure out how to monetize this, because they're not doing this as charity, right? How to monetize this stuff as things get more, application or domain specific or enterprise or, specific. Because I think the initial thinking was, oh, hey, you're going to have this Uber search and you're going to be able to make even more money. And all the excitement shifted to Microsoft with this thesis that somehow you front end one of these GPTs in front of, do the brag thingy with Bing Chat, And then all of a sudden, there's going to be this whole new revolution in how you can monetize search. Well, how's that worked out, right? And I think, it's become less of a differentiated thing because, very quickly, Google can just flip around and, come up with an answer. And that's the scary thing, how quickly everyone can just like pivot on this crap, like AWS with Amazon Q. I mean, that's the answer to Copilot. And they just did it like that. And, it's not that they did something remarkable. You're just front-ending your tool chain and your tool sets for your customers with this stuff. And it's not rocket science. It's just like, I think it's funny when people go, oh my God, look what they did. They were so innovative. It's like, no, they friggin', you have have an API, you're tapping an LLM or whatever, and you're just somehow stitching it into an existing app or a chatbot framework, right? Or application.
Leonard, are you saying there's no innovation? Are you saying this is basically like they took a long extension cord that was plugged into power out in the yard, and then you had like a splitter and you plugged in a bunch of other extension cords to it to power other things? And the people who are using that think it's all coming from you, but it's really coming from this other thing.
You just have a way of with words from.
Well, that's what Copilot is, and that's what
it is. I mean,
it's by somebody else.
I'm sitting there talking. I mean, it's just like, okay, how is this not like you just putting a Gen AI lipstick on existing tools? Even GitHub, right? Even GitHub with Copilot for coding or whatever the hell they call it. It's the same friggin' thing,
Yeah, although I would say there's, so it's all based on the generative AI models, but applying them does matter. Like I know Cadence is working on some stuff, or they've announced some stuff where they can use generative AI to help with board layout and antenna layout and stuff like that. So if you're a company that has 100 engineers doing that stuff, and now Cadence can help you get it done in a few hours that used to take a few weeks, that's a great application of an LLM to solve a real business problem. And it's the same foundation model that's powering the cat poems, right? You're just training it on different data to solve a different problem, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no doubt. There's so especially on the design front, you hear instances where people say, "Look, there's acceleration," but here's a key word: at the task level. Task. They never say the whole process.
Right.
They would say task, and that task could be, we converted like friggin' COBOL into Java or whatever. That task using a code generation tool might have taken you X number of hours plus validation and stuff. But when you use the Gen AI tool, it's not like the other steps, the other tasks in the development lifecycle disappear, right? You actually have to be modified because you're going to have to validate a piece of code that came out that an expert didn't generate, right? It's a template. Yeah. So, now, of course, these things will get better. Whether or not they will automate and, streamline and in a transformative way or revolutionary way, change the way that we design software or build software, we'll see. Out. Do you know what I'm saying? But it boils down to the fundamental capability, the possibilities with the technology. And when I was at AWS, dude, and there was the AI panel. One of the guys who's from Hartford, insurance company that's looking at this stuff. When I asked a question about like model drift and collapse and all these other issues beyond just hallucination, he totally validated up on stage. He's like, these are big problems. And you have to constantly monitor and manage these Gen AI models. If you think it's fire and forget,
Right.
good
No,
luck.
I mean, but there is that inexorable trend. I mean, it's like, 5 years from now, virtually everybody, I think, is going to be using Gen AI in some part of their workflow and something. And it's sort of like
Yeah.
today, like you can't, people today that are starting to drive, all these cars have like cameras and sensors and stuff. Just like, if you told them 5 or 10 years from now you don't have this Gen AI assistant helping you, they'd be like, "What? I mean, how is that even possible?" Like driving a car without cameras and sensors.
It's like, how do you have like fun with a Gen Z or a millennial, with a car? Give them a car with a stick shift.
Yeah.
They have no idea what to do. They can't steal a manual car if they wanted to.
Right.
They're like, what is this thing? What? I don't know what the clutch is. No, you're right. It just builds and builds and builds, and people forget and they lose skills that they needed before because they don't need them anymore. And now, we're all standing on shoulders.
Hopefully, it generates some new skills. I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday who was saying, "Oh, I can't wait for the Gen AI board layout, capability, so I don't have to have as many engineers." Like, I hope those engineers can do something else more productive then.
Well, they'll do validation.
We're gonna free them up to work on higher level tasks.
That's right.
That's what they're going to say.
At the local McDonald's.
Actually, they're gonna. That's code for you're gonna go spend more time with your family.
Well, So, did you see the Intel? Intel did some study. They sponsored some study and said after a year, only 10% of enterprises. I mean, you have to take all the stuff with a grain of salt. 10% have adopted whatever the hell that means, Gen AI into their businesses. 10%.
That sounds fair. I mean, it's early days still. It's just, Copilot just GA'd like a couple months ago. I mean, I think if you ask that question 18 months from now, it'll probably be, 30, 40%.
Right. Well, also the big question is what the hell does adoption mean? But I agree with you, dude. It's just going to be a fabric. I think, again, going back to Dylan Patel yesterday, I tried to get this kid. I don't know if you guys know who Dylan Patel is, but I mean, this kid is like a fucking rock star in the analyst community here, for semiconductors. He's just blowing up, right? But the thing that he and I have going on is I try to get him to tell me how old I am, washed up, and just like friggin', ridiculous I am about Gen AI, right? And this kid, it's funny because he ends up doing this prophetic stuff where he'll when he's supposed to roast me, he'll just say something that's completely truthful, and one of the things is who's going to pay for this stuff? And he asked me, well, are you paying for this stuff? Any of the AI functions? I said, no. And the big question is here, is this stuff just going to be like what, Steffi said this a while back, just, an incremental expected, improvement functionality, right? Is it really going to change the way we engage with technologies or personal computing stuff at large, right? Not in specific they're going to be niche applications that are going to be highly valuable, no doubt. That's always the case, right? But this like hyperbolic BS that we've always challenged, because famously, of course, hype comes to IoT Coffee Talk to die. That we'll see if it happens. But this stuff costs so much money, man. I'm like sitting there listening into all the stuff on the data center side of stuff. It's just like expensive stuff for what? So you can make it like a silly ass little diagram of a kitten. That's like,
are you asking who cares?
yeah. Who cares? Damn it!
Well, like as a billion people starve to death, we're spending all our resources on data centers.
Oh my god!
Training AI models so you can create your own versions of cats and things like that.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's
I mean,
just so much more
it takes
important.
us back to Idiocracy, probably, or we could make a new movie where you kind of show the real world and then this fantasy land that we live in.
It's really quite, it's weird. I mean, where's our priorities at? Like, yesterday there was like a security, like a breakout session. And there was like no one in there. I was like in there with like maybe two other people. And so we are all jokingly stating to each other that, hey, nobody gives a crap about security. That's like, we're talking about
They talk a good game, but they don't give a shit.
You do security at the end. You put
at the end. Yeah.
But
it's so sad.
If you think about it, a lot of the real good stuff, I mean, that when you really get down to the good stuff, it lives in what I call the gap of the ugly, because it's not sexy. Nobody
t-shirt
advertise that they're doing it. But it's foundational to moving the ball forward.
Yeah.
Prime example, we're talking about security, right? Security by design. It's like that should be like your first step. It should be, as you're designing and building, it should be, where's our security, where's our security chain? Well, how are we making sure that layers 1 through 7, if you operate through all of them, are all secure? That's an ugly thing.
Oh yeah. Kappa.
And nobody wants to dive in.
No, it's not glamorous. It's definitely not glamorous, but it needs to get done.
You know why?
It needs to get done. And I mean, that's, I get that question almost every time. Bill, you work with a lot of cities and everything like that. How do you solve these problems? And I was like, honestly, I live in the gap of the ugly. I've got to go in and I've got to start with that. And it's like, what is your security posture, Mr. City?
Right.
And we've got to start there before we do anything on the OT side of the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing, Leonard. You're talking about this data center interconnect, and we're talking about LLMs and everything like that. All right. So let's go back to that age-old question. What problem are you really solving? Because when you train these AI models and everything like that, what is your energy consumption? Is anybody reporting that? Because these things, it doesn't come for free.
No. Yeah, and it's like the training, like I've had a little bit of experience on this lately, and basically your AI power workloads are about 10x, your kind of traditional workloads. So anything that was like a 500, kilowatt box now needs to be a 5 megawatt box to do kind of AI. And then the training versus inferencing. So I think we'll see training, and to do training properly, you do need physically, the clusters need to be near each other. Like there's a lot of physical design that needs to be optimized to do training. And so I think that'll really stay in the confines of some of these hyperscalers and maybe in the core weaves and stuff. But the inferencing though is a lot less, you can use less power and you don't have to be as kind of physically, demanding in the layout. So I think we'll see much more distributed inferencing and much more consolidated training. Moving forward. So
how about the accuracy on the inferencing though?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a function of, how well is the model trained, and then, and how much horsepower can you afford to get away with on the edge.
I had an interesting conversation with one of the Marvell executives. And, so I think I agree with you. Some of the productized training of models, so like, developing like a foundation model, definitely economics much better in the cloud. Now, the fine tuning stuff. So taking an LLM, going and fine tuning it, that could be different. You might not be doing that up in the big cloud, because you're going to be fine tuning all the time. There's going to be this whole administrative process you have to do to maintain these models, to keep them healthy, from preventing them from going into what I call, artificial dementia, right? It happens. I mean, people laugh. They thought I was joking when I first brought this up, like beginning of the year. And now, it's true. These friggin' things, they have mental decline over time. So you have to maintain these things. I think a lot of those workloads, which are kind of semi, model training, blah 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 stuff, that'll probably happen.
That could happen on the edge. Yeah, and that's it's designed to be that. Especially even like if you go into CNNs and non-large language models like AI vision and anomaly detection, that those are all fine-tuned at the edge, which is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, and a lot of the interconnect stuff that's happening, especially the longer distance stuff that could be applied to edge infrastructure, that creates new possibilities, right? Where you can do some really cool edge AI infrastructure innovations that weren't possible before. So Bill, going back to what we were talking about earlier about software versus hardware innovation, that hardware innovation is critical in enabling these new distributed software models and AI computing models to happen, right? And I think that's we can't lose sight of that, and we oftentimes lose sight of it because
but
hardware is hard.
But listen to what you're saying there. That what we're actually talking about is intelligent infrastructure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? That's really the thing. And the infrastructure bill is calling for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but dude, it's like like what we're talking about right now, I don't necessarily hear it out there, dude. I'm serious. And I talk to some pretty ridiculous companies that are on the leading edge of all this stuff, right? And I'm sure that many of us do. I just don't see the stuff.
You know what, Leonard? I've decided I'm going to start using terminology from the past. Like, obviously, we're all into audio here, music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use terminology from decades ago in different audio equipment to describe problems or fine-tuning AI. And so I might say you need to tune the bias level and equalization. I might say when it's hallucinating or it's a little weird, I might say this one's got a lot of wow and flutter to it.
Oh my God.
I think I'm just going to start doing that and then just totally take a whole new vocabulary based on that.
You need to tune your what do you call it? Bias your amp, right? Right, Pete?
Bias your amp.
I heard all that buzzing in the background earlier.
I got it.
Too damn.
It's by design.
Yeah. Like when your head flips around to auto reverse, sometimes that it's just not aligned very well with the tape, and so which is why the Nakamichi Dragon was so popular because it used lasers.
Well, that is a really great analogy because think about it. You bias an amp, a tube amp, you try to unbias an AI model.
Yeah, there you go.
ML model, right?
Yes. There's so I've been using ML.net because I'm a .net guy. Yeah. And I can train models locally on my PC and everything like that. And it even lets me connect to SQL Server to suck in my data to then train and all that stuff. Wow, shocker. Instead of just picking up a CSV file or something like that. But I'm amazed at how much training I can do locally on some of the stuff I'm working on. But I might need to tune to get some of that wow and flutter out of there, or some of the crackle, I might have to get a different cartridge, and a different stylus.
There's
a little too much crackle, I think, sometimes in the latest LLMs, and so that's the thing.
I think you need to switch out your pots, man.
I think so. So, Pete, didn't you go to some cool analyst events this last week or something?
I did a little. I was telling Leonard I did a little tour of Silicon Valley the past couple of days. I met with Rene Haas from ARM, which was great. And I met with Reza from the CEO of Ala Semiconductor. And I stopped at NVIDIA to talk about AI factories and hung out with some Wind River folks, talk about car stuff. So it was just a little couple of days, get out from behind the keyboard and get face to face with folks over a table and a cup of coffee and talk about things. So it was good. I got back last night. And so, yeah, I encourage everyone, and I'm preaching to the converted here, but folks at home too. It's like, it's cool to do Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and stuff, but you also need to get out there in real life and talk to people. And that's, you get the nuances of the conversations, little anecdotes that you wouldn't get, I think. So
that's cool.
Plus, you get to see the size of the people.
That's right, how tall they are. That's really important. Everyone's a lot taller or shorter than you think they are online.
Yeah, exactly. Especially Bill, dude. You're like freaking big, man. Especially your chest. Doing all those shows, dude. It's like freaking ridiculous.
I mean, but I've talked to people on Zoom, and then when I go meet them, I'm like, dude, you're like 5'2".
Right.
You're like 5'2". What the hell? What the hell's going on? You sitting on a stool on Zoom?
So maybe some of these tech companies are led by 5'2" people that have a Napoleon complex.
Oh my God.
Which drives their marketing and
Everyone
stuff
watch the new movie. Watch the new Napoleon movie. There's a good tie-in there.
Yes. I went and saw it by myself.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Really?
It was good. It was good. Yeah.
What about the Godzilla movie? You saw the Godzilla? You saw the Godzilla?
I did.
Godzilla raved about it.
It was really good. You know, when I found out, and that's where we were just like, it flies in the face of all our high tech. When you find out that guy made the new Godzilla movie for $15 million, that's what's going to blow your mind. That's what's going to blow your mind. And it's a better Godzilla movie than all the US ones that we've made.
Spent hundreds of millions of dollars on. Well, the next one will be Gen AI. Gen AI created Godzilla movie for,
This guy, I saw some interviews with him. It just incredible. And they work their asses off, and he's like, I wrote the thing. I was the director and I had to be the head of special effects as well. Shoestring budget, you know what I mean? But they really pulled it off, and they actually had a real story with other stuff like that. It was really good. It was good to
all these tools and stuff really flatten the landscape for creatives to do awesome stuff. You don't need to be.
No pun intended, right?
This Godzilla movie should be a wake-up call for folks in Hollywood, for producers, directors, about what should a movie cost with special effects, because this guy just did a clinic on how you can make arguably the best Godzilla movie ever for $15 million.
Well, it's like that movie Parasite that won the Academy Award.
Yeah,
it's a great movie. Does Hollywood need to, get out of the script room and quit regurgitating old scripts and creating a redux of old
that was
stuff
a great story.
and write the original stuff? And then
story matters, dude.
Seeing a lot of articles, dude, about the gods. I was surprised. I thought it was like, going to be some campy movie, but people are saying it's a great movie. I'm like, what? A Godzilla?
Well, and also, you know what? It's weird to say this. I'll probably get blasted by someone from Japan. But it ties into Godzilla is arguably a cultural element of Japanese culture now, like shoguns and samurai, because it's been part of them since the 50s. This movie is basically a reimagination of the very first Godzilla movie, and it really ties in. It starts at the end of World War II, and it shows you a Tokyo that you've never seen. They look like they're living in a shanty town like you might see in Brazil, and just devastation everywhere. And it's really interesting, and that's what the original Godzilla movie. It was a political statement, maybe pointed at Robert Oppenheimer, arguably, but it was certainly a statement about nuclear weapons. So interesting. They went deep on there, and there was a lot of emotion, so I saw it with my son, and I just said, "Wow, I guess the story matters." And we somehow tied that in because we are weird people. I was like, it reminds me of another Japanese company that didn't have to build super high-powered video game consoles to survive because they have the best stories, and it's Nintendo. Nintendo stuck with low-end stuff, simple graphics, and they still dominate, and it's because the story matters, and the story grabs the people and the kids who are playing Nintendo games, that they didn't have to go do Call of Duty and stuff like that, like an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Right.
Anyway, I would definitely encourage people to go see it and just check it out. Just like, wow, I can't believe they made this for this little money. That's, I was having flashbacks to Spike Lee making She's Gotta Have It by maxing out a bunch of credit cards.
Right.
If you have a great story and you got passion, and you get a bunch of no-name people at the time to be your actors, sometimes you can pull off magic.
That's a great story, man.
Story always matters. So
yeah. Napoleon was good. I think, I think it's also maybe, who knows, that I've been reading stuff about the accuracy of it. Some of it nails it and some of it might be in La La Land. But if nothing else, it's a good history lesson about one of the most important time periods in France.
Yeah.
There
you go.
All right, guys. I gotta go.
All right.
That was a really cool chat. I think it all boils down to what Bill said. Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Right.
Take
So
away. That's the headline.
Yeah.
It really comes down to IoT Coffee Talk versus the 6.5.
Future. Yeah. Well, no comment. Yeah, no, that's cool. So, hey, thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate your viewership and your listenership. Is that a word? Is it listenership?
It is now.
Just invented that. Remember, who cares?
There you go.
Right? That's the most important thing. It's the most important question for any IoT or tech practitioner out there. And we'll want to remind everyone that we have a donation drive that we're still doing, okay, for Elevate Our Kids at www.elevateourkids.org. And what we're trying to do is bridge this digital equity divide for kids K through 12 in underserved and unserved and distressed communities. And we're trying to help the community of Lahaina in Maui in light of the tragic fires that they suffered earlier this year. And so remember to like, subscribe, donate to Elevate Our Kids. Just go to www.elevateourkids.org. And remember, like, share, opine, comment, tell us how great we are or how great we are in the comment section below.
This is a great place for music too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And hey, thank you, Pete, for entertaining us with your amazing virtuosity on guitar and, taking the load off of me. Really appreciate that. Very talented gentleman. And we will see you next week.